I want to first talk about the histology of the spinal cord. This is an image I've taken from Complete Anatomy. I've removed various components to expose a spinal nerve emerging from an intervertebral foramen. Here's the spinal cord. It's shaped like a slightly flattened cylinder with the anterior or ventral median fissure. This is the front view, or actually a slightly side-on view. The mid-sagittal plane would be in this direction. Of course, you'd also know this was the anterior view because of these vertebral bodies here and here. This is a spinal nerve, and there is another one up here and also down here, emerging from intervertebral foramina. I've removed one of the thoracic vertebra from here to expose the nerve rootlets and spinal nerve emerging from the spinal cord. Spinal nerves are said to be mixed nerves because they contain both motor and sensory axons. Emerging from each half of the spinal cord are these posterior and anterior nerve rootlets, or small bundles of axons. Both sets of rootlets unite as one posterior and one anterior root. Then they all unite at each vertebral segment, just before emerging from the intervertebral foramen to form the spinal nerve. Just before they unite, the posterior root houses the posterior root ganglion. Now, you may wish to use the term dorsal and ventral instead of posterior and anterior respectively, because that's also common terminology. The posterior or dorsal root ganglion is often called the spinal or sensory ganglion because it houses the cell bodies of sensory neurons. The anterior or ventral root contains motor axons only. They arise from ventral or lateral horns of the spinal cord. I'll show you in a moment, when you can view a histological section through the spinal cord. Now I'm going to show you two transverse sections through the spinal cord. The first section will be just through the cord and won't include the dorsal and ventral roots or spinal nerve, just because I want you to first focus on the spinal cord only. This is a histological section through the lumbar region of the spinal cord, just to point out the general histological features of the spinal cord. This stain colours myelin blue, cell nuclei purple, Nissl substance, or clumps of granular or rough endoplasmic reticulum pink, and general cytoplasm remains colourless. This blue-stained outer portion of the spinal cord is white matter. This pale-stained area here is an issue with the penetration or exposure of the stain, so an artifact. White matter is composed of tracts of axons running up and down the spinal cord, and hence cut transversely here. Up here, on both sides, are profiles where the section has passed through a few dorsal nerve rootlets and just a bit of a dorsal root. The grey matter is this pale, butterfly-shaped or distorted H-shaped inner area. The dorsal horns are these two thinner areas of grey matter extending out to the edge of the tissue section from these two ventral horns, which appear as rounder bulges surrounded by white matter. The lumbar section demonstrates the cell bodies of the ventral horn motor neurons particularly well. These are these purple stained structures here and over here. Their axons project via ventral roots to skeletal muscles, often at some considerable distance away, and so you'd expect their cell bodies to be very large, as you can see here. Just at the edge of the grey matter, between the dorsal and ventral horns, is this indistinct lateral horn, or really just a region which also has several large neurons, but you may not be able to see them yet that clearly. I'll show you an image of these neurons at a later time. A thoracic section of the spinal cord would show this lateral horn best as a distinct bulge. The dorsal horn has many small interneurons, but none comparable in size to the giant motor neurons that you see in the ventral horn. And in the centre here lies the central canal. The ventral horn motor neurons have a pale stained nucleus with a prominent nucleolus and very conspicuous Nissl granules, or granular endoplasmic reticulum, and will have multiple dendrites, which of course will be out of the plane of this section. You should be able to see that there are many other small cell nuclei in the grey matter. Most of these are from glial cells, although some will belong to small interneurons. I'll describe the glial cells later on. And here are a few lateral horn neurons. These are cell bodies of preganglionic neurons of the autonomic nervous system. Now, here's a challenge question for you. From all the information I have disclosed to you in the last two images, would these neurons be sympathetic or parasympathetic first neurons? Remember, this is a section through the lumbar region of the spinal cord.